Welcome along to episode 15 of the Lifting in Life podcast. I'm Cam, I'm the host. I have a degree in psychology, I'm a personal trainer, and I also work in IT. On the episode today, I sit down and chat with Scotty, and we do deal with some really heavy topics, including his journey with testicular cancer, from the treatment to the diagnosis and to where he is now. So I do want to give you a heads up. I understand and acknowledge, for me as well, these topics are really close to home. So I do just want to give you an advance warning and a heads up about that. As well as his journey with testicular cancer, we also talk about his journey with mental health, including his experience with psychologists and psychiatrists and different avenues of treatment. So that's very insightful, and I personally learnt a lot. And then finally, we talk about Scotty's desire to want to get into the New Zealand police force, what that entails and his goals, and what he wants to achieve in order to be able to get in to the NZ police. Now, as always, I hope you enjoyed the episode. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Thanks. Hope you enjoy. Episode 15. Scotty is in the house. We made it happen. It's nice to be in person. I know it was a bit of admin for us, but we made it. Now, there's a few different things I'll be keen to chat to you about today. I want to start off pretty superficial, pretty basic. I just want to know what your training looks like at the moment and what your goals are from your current training.
Cool, yeah, thanks for having me on, Cam. Current training goals are a bit all over the place at the moment. I had great plans of starting off the new year, getting into the gym and being super organised, but that kind of hasn't happened yet. Big focus for me at the moment is to get my fitness up in terms of running. One of my main goals, either this year or next year, is to join New Zealand Police.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
Yeah, pretty crazy goal, but fingers crossed we'll get there.
Yeah. So when you have a goal like that, what sort of steps do you put in place when you're wanting to achieve it?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I do have a personal trainer. He's based in Brisbane.
Oh, cool.
So I'll start working with him again in a month or so. I did work with him a bit last year, so he's got some good things in place, and just pick up from where we left off basically, and work through his program, and hopefully we'll get there.
That's exciting, man. And I'm sure there's a lot of people who can relate to wanting to start 2023 off with a bang and be a different person than they were a couple of days prior to 2023. So with you saying that your plan hasn't necessarily gone the way that you wanted it to, what are you doing now to change it and put it back onto a different course?
Yeah, good question. So just basically trying to get into the gym every day. Last week I managed to get in, I think it was about 3 out of 4 days. That was good. I normally only gym 4 or so days a week, sometimes 5 if I'm really feeling like it. So just getting back into that routine, hopefully we'll go from there and not stop.
Now, going back a little bit further in terms of your life up to where you are now, what kind of role has fitness or training or the gym kind of played in your life up till now?
Yeah, I guess over the last 7 or so years, it's been a pretty big thing in my life. Prior to that, I was not into sports or exercise of any kind. It really helps me with my mental health and just being the best person that I can be.
That's a good segue actually, because I know you're a big advocate for mental health, men's mental health. So what do you sort of do in that space, and what's the passion that you have there?
Yeah, so I guess it all comes from struggling with my own mental health. Back in 2015, 2016, I had a pretty big battle with depression. So I didn't really have anything to do with mental health before then. Didn't really know anything about it. Since I've been through that myself, I've worked with a few other people, mostly on Instagram, and have done a number of podcasts around the place, highlighting how important mental health is and staying on top of it.
It's something that I love to delve into on this podcast, especially being a personal trainer. As you know, having a personal trainer, they're so much more than just someone who tells you how to do a bicep curl, right? You come to them bringing a whole heap of stuff. You bring your whole self to a personal trainer. So in my experience, I've played a role in people's lives when they're going through things with their mental health as well as their physical health. So what were some of the things that you would do in relation to your mental health to help go through the journey and overcome it?
Yeah, I think my first personal trainer was Jesse Lawton. So I went and started working with him when I was at probably one of my lowest points. And Jesse ended up becoming quite a good friend of mine, and I knew I could go to him and have a chat as well as working out with him in the gym. So I guess he played a massive part in getting me to a good point in life.
And one piece of advice I often say to people who, ask me about mental health is I love to talk to them about the benefits of physical training, because physical training, I really genuinely believe it can also alter you mentally and help improve your mental well-being. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but if you're putting yourself through something challenging, you're overcoming things, you're achieving your goals, then it's going to lead to better mental health outcomes. It's obviously not going to be the solution or the be-all, end-all, but I think it can help. So what were some of the things you were doing physically throughout that time? What did your training look like, or what did your routines look like?
Yeah, Jesse liked to change things up for me, which is pretty cool. I think just having a personal trainer and me knowing I had to go and meet him at a certain time, like that actually got me out of the house. So we did a mix of things. It was cardio, weights, and he just really got me introduced into the gym and pretty much showed me around.
That's really cool. I'd be keen to delve in a little bit deeper into your journey as well. So that was 2016, 2017, you said, right?
Yeah.
And then as we've chatted about off the podcast, in 2019, you had a experience with your health and you were diagnosed with cancer. It's obviously a really heavy topic for a lot of people, so I want to acknowledge that. Same with me. It's not affected me personally, but people that are in my family and loved ones, so I know how close to home it can be. What was it like that year or that moment for you when you were diagnosed? How did you find out, and what can people learn from your story? I know that's a lot of questions in one, but we'll start off with the first one. So how did you know, or how did that journey start?
Yeah, so that journey started for me, it was towards, it would have been February 2019, just feeling really tired and didn't really feel like I wanted to go to work and things like that. Just didn't have the energy that I normally had. And I was actually homesick one day from work and didn't roll out of bed until about lunchtime, which is most unlike me. I'm normally out like 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And this particular day I jumped out of bed and just jumped in the shower. I thought that might wake me up a bit. And I've never in my life checked before, but on this particular day I did check for any lumps in my testicles and came across one pretty much straight away.
Mm-hmm.
And from that point I was like, okay, this is not good. Pretty much jumped on it straight away.
Yeah.
Went and saw my doctor as soon as I could get in. And the interesting thing is that she wasn't actually concerned about it. She's like, I don't really think it's anything to worry about.
Oh, wow.
And I said to her, I was like, I'm not happy with that. And she's like, okay, well, if you're not happy with that, then we can refer you for an ultrasound. I'm like, okay, that's cool. And I've got medical insurance, so it was all covered anyway. So I think it was the following week that I managed to get in for an ultrasound. And pretty much arrived at Horizon Radiology, and the sonographer started the process. And then originally she couldn't actually find the lump, so there's a TV screen at the end of the bed, so you can see what's going
everything.
on. And so I actually had to show her where it was, and then she kind of honed in on that area. And then I could see on the screen that there were like 3 lumps rather than just one, like I thought there was. And she pretty much said to me, like, they're not really allowed to give too much away because it's not their job.
Yeah.
But she did say that all 3 lumps do have a blood supply attached to them. And she said that's definitely not a good sign.
Oh, wow.
And pretty much left it at that.
Man. So there's a few really key learnings there. And the first one is obviously, guys, everyone, check yourself. If you don't think something's right, regular checks, as we all hear. But the second part of that I found real interesting is that when you first went, they were not concerned, and you obviously had the courage and the ability to stand up and say, well, I'm not taking no for an answer. So you went and got that ultrasound or the second opinion. I feel like a lot of people might be a little bit too nervous or could potentially just agree with them. They are the medical professional, right? So that's actually a real good piece of advice, and I haven't heard someone talk or mention that happening before, where you believe something's wrong, the doctor or the nurse says, no, that's not the case, and then you went and got that ultrasound anyway.
Yeah, most people probably wouldn't push through that. They'd just take their doctor's advice. But I just had this deep gut feeling that something wasn't right. And at that point, I didn't even know anyone who had been through testicular cancer. It was just, simply this gut feeling that something wasn't right, and I was determined to get to the bottom of it quickly.
Yeah, and I have gone to the doctor as well and got something checked before. Thankfully, there wasn't anything of concern. So I know that feeling, man, when you think you found something or you think something's not right, especially in an area that's obviously really private and sensitive, to then go to the doctor and have them also examine it. It's not an easy thing to do, right?
No, it's not an easy thing to do. But I guess I don't know whether I'm lucky or unlucky. I've also been through a bit of a battle with Crohn's disease as well. So I got diagnosed with Crohn's disease back in 2013. So I guess I'm kind of used to doctors looking, and I've had that many colonoscopies, so everyone's been looking at my private parts. So I guess it didn't really faze me.
You don't have that sort of barrier there. I just find that, I don't know, when pets really don't like to go into vets because it's just everything that's associated with it. I think that's how I feel when it comes to hospitals and doctors. It's just, you don't go there when you're just feeling happy and nice and everything's all good, right? It's always got some sort of underlying negative connotation more often than not. So you had the ultrasound. She gave you that little piece of information, which obviously isn't good news, but like you say, they're not there to diagnose, so they can't divulge any more information than that. What was the process after that?
Yeah, so it was a pretty interesting process after that, actually. So I did have to wait around for a bit for the results. So I think I got them like the following week, or it may have been later that week. From there, they referred me to a urologist at Wellington Hospital. So pretty much, rocked up to that appointment. I think that was like a week later as well. And I just went by myself. Didn't take anyone with me, because none of my family live in Wellington, and I was like, oh, well, I might need them down the track, so I'll just rock up to this by myself, and we'll see what happens. Pretty much rock into the urologist's office and hadn't even had a chance to sit down, and he's like, oh, it's cancer, eh? And I was like, I had a pretty damn good
it's
idea
cancer,
that it was.
Well, I'm here at this appointment to understand that, but I suppose it is. Yep.
Yeah, it was an interesting way of being told, actually.
Yeah.
He was just real open about it, and I guess the really interesting thing was he didn't really explain what would happen, so I had to ask all the questions. And I guess, like with most cancers, you kind of just assume that they'll go in and do a biopsy, and they'll send it off, and then you kind of work from there.
Is this private or public?
This is public. I could have gone private as well, but the waiting time was about the same, so I was like, I might as well save some money and go public. So From there, he pretty much booked me in for a orchidectomy, which is removal of a testicle. So I had to wait, I think it was about 2 or 3 weeks at that point, just to try and, get in. And they were going to do it in town, then they were going to do it in the hut, and then finally they decided on Kenepuru, so I ended up going into hospital out there.
Yeah.
But yeah, kind of before I had the operation, there's a whole lot of different things that I hadn't really considered. So I was like, okay, well, I need to decide whether I want to have kids. Because if I have to go through chemo, then that obviously affects your fertility. And yeah, that was kind of like, okay, shit, I'm 26. I've got some big decisions I need to make now. I haven't got any time to think about it. So yeah, ended up going to a fertility clinic and banking sperm just in case I'd need that down the track. And that was an interesting process as well, something that I'd never ever thought I'd need to do. Yeah, and I guess that's quite challenging as well, because you've got so much going through your head at once. You're trying to make these decisions, and then I was like, well, I guess banking that's kind of like an insurance policy. I've got it if I need it. If I don't need it, then, we're sweet.
I appreciate you being so open about your journey as well, because I've had a close mate of mine going through a similar journey too. So thankfully I've got a little bit of an insight, but some people might not know anyone who have gone through a journey like this. So it's really insightful to understand how it works, from the beginning. And it's interesting, the idea of how you had to contemplate whether or not you wanted kids and stuff. It's like you've got this health scare come in, and then all of a sudden you realize how finite life is, and you have to contemplate these big, I don't know, not necessarily existential questions, but these big life decisions. And it sounds like you had to do it with haste, like you had to do it then and there.
Yeah, there was no time for mucking around.
Yeah.
It was, make a decision and roll with it pretty much. And that was hard, because, you're thinking about so much at the time, like, am I going to live through this and everything? But I was like, right, I've got to make a decision. Let's just roll with it. So, that's what I did.
And throughout that time, say prior to the operation, what did your day-to-day look like? I could imagine it would have a massive toll on your mental health, obviously. So what were the things that you did throughout that time?
Yeah, it did take a bit of a toll on my mental health. I guess kind of going through the whole depression thing a few years earlier kind of set me up to deal with this. If I hadn't, gone through that in 2015, 2016, then I probably wouldn't have coped as well through this. So day to day was pretty much, I just tried to carry on as normal. I was still in the office at work. I was still working for Air New Zealand at this point, and I just tried to continue on as best I could. And probably one of the hardest things I've had to do was to let one of my good mates know about it, and also let my team at work know.
I can imagine that you wouldn't want to feel like a burden or a bearer of negative news to people who are close to you.
Yeah, you do feel like that. I think it was probably quite hard telling my team at work, even though we were really close. I told a couple of people in the team first, and then basically told the rest of the team that I was going to be away for a while. And everyone was really supportive, and I was pretty much open and honest about what was happening from the beginning. So no hiding anything.
Yeah, I haven't been in your position, like I said, in terms of delivering that news, but I've received it a couple times, and it's really interesting being on the other end, because at least my perspective of it was, I don't want to bring this person any more stress or worry and be obviously worried and anxious for them. It's in the most recent one with testicular cancer, I could at least bring some information about what I've learned from cancer and radiation and chemo and all that stuff and help them out. So what were the responses like from your loved ones? You said there was a lot of support there. Was there anything that sort of made it a little bit more difficult to deliver the news, or?
Yeah, most people were fairly supportive. I remember telling my best mate, and he is actually a detective, so he was down in Christchurch at the mosque shootings.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, kind of delivering that news to him. He had a lot on his plate at the time, and then getting that from me definitely wasn't easy for him, and I know it affected him heaps. I guess telling mum was, again, probably one of the hardest things I've had to do. Like everyone was really supportive. I did have a few friends that I told that I just got no response from, but later found out that's because they didn't know how to deal with it. They were supportive down the track, but I think just the initial news was a bit of a shock to them, and they just didn't really know how to process it and what to say to me. So that was a little bit difficult to deal with at the time. But you kind of learn how people work, and
Well, that's an interesting learning. That's a really good piece of wisdom there, is that although they necessarily haven't contacted you back, it's nothing personal. It's not the fact that they don't care about you. It's almost probably the opposite. It's they care about you so much that they don't know how to feel and they don't know what to say. 'Cause it is awkward. What do you say? Like, oh, sorry to hear that, or like, I'm here for you. And it's easy to overthink the response. So
yeah, it is. It's an interesting one, eh? I guess some people do overthink it, and some people don't. They just get in contact with you straight away, and everyone's different.
So the procedure from there up in Kinniperu, that's an interesting spot for it.
Yeah, so I don't really know why they wanted to do it there, but supposedly it was to get me in quicker. I was like, okay, we'll roll with it. Had to be out there. It was about by 6:30 in the morning. I was one of the first ones up. So at this point in time, you've got a lot going through your head, and I kind of already organised with the urologist that I was going to have a fake testicle put in. So I was kind of used to that idea. And then the surgeon rocks in and pretty much tells me how it's going to go. And he was luckily one of the top surgeons in Wellington and is pretty experienced in this.
Put you at ease a little bit.
So I was kind of at ease. But then he was like, okay, I don't recommend that we put the fake one in.
And this was like hours less than before the operation.
This is like less than an hour before the operation. And I was like, shit.
Yeah.
And then he kind of explained why he recommended that he didn't do that. Yeah. And he had some really logical explanations for it and said that most people end up having it taken out. Yeah. And I was like, okay, well, I don't want to go through this whole thing again, so we'll just rock with your decision. And been pretty happy with that ever since.
People opt not, or so they get it removed due to like it's uncomfortable, it's complicated, it's like
so
a mixture of things.
That a lot of guys get it removed because it is uncomfortable, it just doesn't feel right. Yeah. But then now they make them out of a different silicone, which isn't as good as what they previously made them out of.
I thought you were going to say the opposite.
So he recommended just not go with it. So I was like, I'll take your advice. And
he's the expert.
He's the expert.
When my mate was going through the same thing, he had to have one removed too. They originally had the wrong one noted down.
Oh, really?
And he noticed it. And so this was before his operation too, the day of, they had, I can't remember which way it went, but they had his right one noted down, but it was actually the left one they needed to remove. So the surgeon came in because he obviously brought it to their attention and put a big X on the leg, which is the side that they needed to remove. So
they did that for me actually, put a big X on, but they definitely had the right side from the start.
Oh man! And then so the journey from there, from the little bit that I understand, it's quite a bit of a recovery process, right? It's a few weeks after the operation that you're quite sort of bedridden, or you can't really do too much.
Yeah, I think it affects different people in different ways. So they basically kicked me out within 4 hours. So I was out of there.
Really?
Yeah, it was
You're
only
like still high on all the drugs at that point.
in and out. And yeah, got sent home, and at that point my best mate did actually come up from Christchurch from where he was. And I think the following night him and I actually went out to town.
Sure. Why not? Fire up.
Yeah, I wasn't actually in too much pain. Which was, that was good. So I was still able to, go around and do stuff. But I think the hardest thing was that I couldn't really do much at the gym for 8 weeks. And
that's a decent amount of time,
with that.
Yeah. So what did that recovery process look like for you? My mate, he was, I wouldn't say he was bedridden, but he was definitely quite sore for a few weeks, and even walking around was a bit challenging. But it sounds like your recovery was a little bit faster, given that you're on the beers the night after.
Yeah. It was interesting that I was able to do that. I didn't really think that would be happening, but yep, it did.
There you were.
There we were in town. I think kind of the recovery after that was, pretty straightforward. Lucky that it didn't get infected, which was good. And I think most people probably really don't know, but I never really got told where the incision line was going in.
Yeah.
So when I woke up from the operation, I was sore kind of just down under my belly button, and I was like, why am I so sore here? And then the guy was like, oh, that's where we kind of cut in. And
so interesting. You'd think because there's this thing hanging down, they would cut open that thing and pop it out or something, but they don't. It's through your abdomen, and then they pull it up through there.
Yeah, it's so strange.
It's real interesting.
And especially not being told that before I had it. I was like, this is weird.
Very confused. And so the other thing with cancer too, actually, is obviously you can occasionally there'll be radiation, or there could be chemo, or there'll be both. And obviously the radiation is when it's localized, so they're trying to target a specific area, and it's only like a 10-minute session once a week, completely painless. And then obviously if it spreads into the lymph nodes, then that's when the chemotherapy route has to be done, because then it's being circulated through the system, and they determine that from the biopsy what stage it is, whether it's spread. So yours didn't spread? You didn't have to have chemo, or?
Nah, so I didn't have to have chemo or radiation.
Wow.
I was very lucky. They reckon if I'd left it another couple of weeks, then we probably would have had to have gone down that route. So I was just thankful that I got onto it in time. And it was just a bit of sitting at home for a couple of weeks. I was still working from home. Didn't really want to go into the office because I didn't really want to talk to everyone at that point in time. But it was very, very lucky.
And did they give you an estimated time frame as to how long it had been around for?
No, they didn't really say anything about that.
Because for my mate, they said it had been there for at least 1.5 years.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's wild, eh?
Yeah.
No,
and he also didn't have to have chemo or radiation. But the thing, radiation is so localized, and when it's something like a testicle and they remove it, you wouldn't have to get radiation unless, I don't even know, because they've removed the whole thing.
Yeah,
whereas if it was on an organ or something like that, they might be able to remove some of it, but then that's obviously could be deadly. So that's when you'd have a radiation on it to try and kill the cancer locally.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you thankfully got onto it pretty quickly and didn't have to have the chemo.
Yeah, no, very, very lucky with that. It was kind of interesting between going to the urologist and actually having the operation. I was in a bit of pain over that time because you could actually feel it growing. The guy said if you left it another 2 weeks, then we probably wouldn't be having this conversation. We'd be having a different conversation.
And since then, have you found that these experiences that you've gone through, you've been able to help other people with them? Obviously, you're a big advocate for the mental health stuff. So I'm assuming the answer is yes, but I'd be interested to understand what that's looked like since 2019. How have you helped other people?
Yeah, so I guess I've been pretty open about my journey, and I've spoken to various different people. People who have gone through mental health battles, people that have had testicular cancer, or people who have had it. It's been quite interesting just learning off others that have gone through it to see what their experiences have been, and I guess also it's kind of cool to also help anyone. People have questions. If they're going through it, they're definitely going to have questions. So it's been pretty cool to be able to talk to them and kind of chat them through what I went through and what they may possibly go through as well.
Yeah. And for some perspective, what would the rough age range of the age range be for the guys that you've spoken to?
The guys I've spoken to, probably anywhere between about 19 up to about 34. So it's quite a large...
But still young though, like super young. I think
still super young.
Especially when you're 19, 20, and I think it's the healthy way to be, but you kind of almost think you're invincible and you don't think life is infinite, but the opposite of life isn't confronting you. It's 80 years away or something, so having a massive health scare at such a young age would be so confronting and such a big ordeal to have to go through.
Yeah, it's definitely a big ordeal, eh? I guess I was lucky with the testicular cancer that, I'd been through things prior to that set me up to deal with this. Yeah. But speaking to a lot of these guys that I've spoken to, they haven't been through anything before. This has been like the first major thing that they've been through. Yeah. So, I really feel for them, eh? And, I was talking to a guy who's over in the States and he doesn't have medical insurance. And I think his operation costs something like $35,000.
Yeah. Tens of thousands.
So we're lucky here in New Zealand that everything's covered.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just really good perspective for young guys too, to realise that if you don't think something's quite right, go and get it checked. Just because, you're not retired doesn't mean that you can't have like a big health scare or health complications.
Yeah, exactly. I'd never checked before this day, and I don't know what made me check this day, but I do check regularly now just to see what else might be there. And I'm in and out of the hospital to radiology all the time for different checks, and have blood tests all the time as well.
Oh, true. So there's still like post-op checkups that you get.
Yeah, so that pretty much lasts for a 5-year period. After your diagnosis. So the first couple of years it's pretty intensive. I think it's like blood tests every month. And then I think it's a chest x-ray every 6 months, and then a CT scan every 12 months. But as you kind of get down, through the years and get towards the 5-year mark, then the frequency drops off. So I think I'm only in for a blood test every 3 months now, and I have a chest x-ray every year, and then I think there should be a CT scan next year for me.
Well, that's good peace of mind to know that even though they've removed it, there's still this sort of post-op plan for 5 years as well to check it up and make sure nothing sort of is coming back.
Yeah, it's good that they do that. I guess in New Zealand we're pretty lucky that they have got a pretty intensive monitoring process like that, because I know some other countries are not as fortunate.
And you mentioned there a couple of times that this was sort of the year following your journey with depression, and how you had tools to be able to better handle this scenario. Would you say those tools were specific strategies that you could implement, or was it more of a mindset and understanding how to approach the situation? Like, were there specific things, or was it more of a big picture, your mindset was different so you were able to cope with it?
I think probably my mindset was different. Like, I'd learned different tools from psychologists and psychiatrists that I'd seen. And I actually still am on antidepressants and probably will be for a while. So I think being on those as well kind of, helped me, and I wasn't stressing out about going through this testicular cancer battle as much as what I probably would have been had I not been on the medication.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm no psychiatrist, and I don't know anything about medication really, but I've known people who have been on antidepressants or not on antidepressants or a mixture of both, tried to stop it. And I think there definitely is times when it's absolutely necessary to go on medication like that. I know that there can be a mindset that, I don't know, maybe you're weak or like you can't handle it, or, I'll get through it myself without having to reach for something like that. But I think there's absolutely times when you need to reach for something like that. What is your perspective on that?
Yeah, I wasn't anti it to start off with. I did have a few reservations about it, but I was like, we might as well just try it to see what happens. And I think that there's a history of it in my family as well. So I was like, okay, well, this is probably half genetic anyway, so we might as well just roll with the medication and see what happens. But it did take, I think it was the 6th one that I tried. That was actually the one for me.
Different type.
Yeah,
oh,
so
wow.
We went through, that period was absolute hell, chopping and changing and coming off things.
Your hormones and your feelings would be all over the show.
Yeah, you're all over the place, all right?
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah, and that is the clear distinction that you make there is there's obviously genetic components, but then sometimes life just kind of sucks, right? And you're going through a shitty situation, and maybe in those moments there are lots of things that you can learn and you can push through it without having to go down the medication route. But I wouldn't say that that's always the solution, is to try and push through it and to try and do it yourself, because there are situations or different genetic factors that mean that you should go down the medical kind of route. So it's nice that you're opening up about that. I know it's a bit of a taboo kind of subject sometimes.
Yeah, it is a bit of a taboo subject. I've always been pretty open with it. And I think my whole journey with depression was, a big part of it was the people I was hanging around with as well. You think you have some really close mates, and when you go through stuff like this, they might be supportive for a while, and that, my core group of mates were fairly supportive for a while, and then one of them just turned the whole group against me.
Oh, wow.
So I was kind of dealing with all of that going on at the same time. But yeah, I guess key piece of advice for other people going through depression is just stick with those that support you. You are going to lose some mates over it, and it's hard. It's really hard. And I think until you change your kind of mindset and ditch those people, you're not going to get ahead.
What that makes me think of is the amount of energy that we have to give to everything in our life. If you consider it like a battery or like a cup or whatever, there's a maximum capacity of energy that you can give. And when you're going through a journey like that, that's going to be diminished. So then to also have to deal with negative social things happening and stuff, that's only going to take away more and more energy. So it sounds like you are self-aware and acknowledged where your energy needed to be and where it didn't need to be at that time.
Yeah, I got to that realization eventually. It did take months. I was hanging on to these people because I thought, they're meant to be my mates.
And when you've been friends for years too, it's just a given. Like, you are mates, and like you don't really ever question that, right? It just, that is how it is.
Yeah, you certainly don't question it until something like this happens. And then I think, it did take me a while to kind of realize that, I've got to get rid of these people. And then obviously the psychologists were telling me the same thing, like, you've got to get rid of these people. And but when you've been mates for, like 4 or 5 years, and you're super close and go and do everything together, and then to lose one of your best mates, and then to lose the rest of the crew, it certainly doesn't make life easy. Yeah,
and it's a large part of your identity too, because so Chloe went to a sports psychologist one time, and I use this analogy all the time. If your life is like a pie and it's divided up into slices, and that builds your identity, your friend group is a huge part of your identity. So if you lost a a big chunk of that would affect almost who you are as a person as well.
Yeah, big time. It really did affect who I was as a person. I got to the point where I didn't even want to leave the house. Or, every time I saw these people, in town from a distance, or I just completely flip out. Yeah. And then, it even got as far as I had a mate down from Taranaki for a weekend, and we were actually out in town, and we were up at Dirty Little Secret. And a friend of one of these so-called mates, tried to take a swing at me in town. Oh, wow. So they'd obviously all been talking behind my back, and
story escalated.
Oh yeah, it was utter hell through that time.
Yeah. Wow, that's a lot to take on, eh? And you've mentioned psychologists a couple of times. I know that this is a big area of interest. If I'm asking too many questions or we're getting in too deep, you don't have to answer either. But I'd be interested to know, what is your journey with a psychologist or multiple psychologists been like, and what have you learnt throughout that journey?
Yeah, so that was also a very interesting journey. Not surprised that you've asked.
Yeah. So, I did my bachelor's degree in psychology, so I'm really intrigued by psychology, and being a personal trainer for a number of years, so I'm just always interested in that kind of stuff, especially the strategies that they provide you, or the advice that they give, or the tools that can help you through a situation really intrigues me. So I'd be interested to know what your experience was like.
Yeah, so I guess my first interaction with a psychologist was through the EAP program at work, and I probably went and saw her 5 or 6 times, and she was an interesting person, not someone that I ever really gelled with. And she'd give me like exercises to do and like little worksheets, and I just couldn't gel with her. So I actually stopped going, and was like, okay, yeah, no, she's not the person that I need to be helping me. You have a gut feeling. And then ended up talking to a psychiatrist. I can't even remember how we got onto him in the end.
And the key distinction between psychologists and psychiatrists is the ability to prescribe medication, right?
Yeah.
So a psychiatrist has the medical degree, whereas a psychologist doesn't have that medical degree, so can't prescribe medication.
Yeah, exactly. So you find that a lot of psychiatrists and psychologists do work pretty closely together.
Yeah.
So I started seeing this psychiatrist, and they are there to test you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They will push you to your limits, and I can remember the first session with him. Mum actually came down for it, rock up to his office, and he's actually out in Karori, and he just absolutely pushed me to my limits. And then at the end of it, I was just literally yelling and screaming at him.
And was this before or after your cancer stuff?
This is before all the cancer stuff.
Yeah.
Chopping and changing.
Yeah. No, that's good.
So he was very interesting.
Is it just sort of the questions he was asking, or the topics he was getting?
Yeah, it was kind of just the questions. They just dive and keep going. Yeah. There's no stopping.
Yeah.
And I guess that was kind of the first time I'd ever seen a psychiatrist. So
especially the first one. I don't know. Yeah. I think a first interaction, you think about it, just get to know each other, I'm this, you're that, find a mutual ground or whatever. But to have the first session be intense, I could imagine might have been quite a surprise.
It was quite a surprise. Yeah. It started off all very nice, and then then he just kept asking these questions, and then I think the second session ended up being a bit better than the first, which is crazy.
Yeah.
And then he referred me to a psychologist down here in town.
Oh yeah.
And I did a bit of Googling to find out, how long
she'd
been around and what she'd specialised in, and then ended up working with her. So the psychiatrist, he pretty much prescribed me the medication in conjunction with working with the psychologist. And then I just started having sessions with her, and instantly I clicked with her. First session was very different from the psychiatrist. She was a lot more laid back and didn't ask as many, deep questions.
Invasive questions.
But then I guess she'd also read the report that the psychiatrist had given her.
She didn't have to. I
didn't have to tell her everything.
So
I ended up working with her for, that would have been most of 2016 and most of 2017.
And the perspective I have when it comes to health, say you're mentally you're not feeling well, or maybe you've got a sore knee, or I don't know, you've got a headache or something, there's always, it's presented as some kind of symptom. Like if something isn't quite right or quite how you want it to be, my perspective is that you shouldn't just look at the thing in isolation. So if you've got a sore knee, it could be coming from your ankle, it could be coming from your hip or your back, or it could be coming from how you're standing on a day-to-day basis. There's always this holistic picture to it. Same if you've got a headache, or you're not mentally feeling quite 100%, you're feeling a bit down, maybe it's your nutrition, or I don't know, there's always external or broader factors that could be presented as this one symptom. So when you're seeing people like psychologists and psychiatrists, how granular are they looking? Are they looking at you not feeling 100%, so we'll prescribe this, or is it they build a picture of what you do outside of your sessions as well, or more of a holistic perspective?
They want to know everything about you, every little detail. Psychologist probably wasn't as hung up on that as a psychiatrist was. But yeah, they do want to know a lot about you. They want to know who you hang out with, what you do for work, what you do in your spare time, and they will start building a picture.
Oh man, that's so good to know, because that's my only qualm sometimes of like medical professionals, is that everything is looked at in a really granular way. Like, oh, you get headaches often, well, here's some Panadol. But really you've got really poor posture and you've got tension in your posterior chain. So if you did some stretching and mobility work, perhaps you wouldn't get those headaches anymore. So that's quite promising to know that they did want to build that really big picture on you and your habits. And then, so they build that picture, and then the advice that they provide, is it in line with obviously everything you do? It's not just like, here's some medication or do some breathing once a day. What kind of tools do they provide you?
Yeah, they give you heaps of different tools, I guess, my psychologist, she gave me various things to work on. She gave me a lot of websites to look at. Also suggested a few apps that I could download on my phone. But yeah, I think the best piece of advice from her was to just keep away from these negative people. And I didn't to start with. It took me a while to learn. Yeah.
Well, and it would be difficult too, because hanging out with people, like, it's built upon habits as well. It's Friday night, I'm gonna go see the boys for a beer at this place. Whatever your habits are, or maybe it's not a beer, it's you go fishing or you do something. It's built on these habits that you would do together. So it's the outcome is not seeing the friends, but I guess the implication is the habits that are built around seeing your friends. That would be another difficult aspect of that having to change.
Yeah, that was hugely difficult. You end up totally changing how you live.
Yeah.
You've all of a sudden got to find a new friend group and try and break into a whole different circle, which is hard.
As an adult, man, that's hard.
It's hard.
When you're going through school and everyone starts school at the same time and everyone's kind of new and wants friends and stuff. Once you get past school and uni or whatever you do straight after school and you're in the workplace, it does become real difficult to, I guess, one, make friends, but two, make genuine connections. There's people who you'd love to hang out with at work and you look forward to seeing them at work, but whether or not you'd hang out outside of work, that's a whole nother ball game, right?
Oh, it is a completely different ball game, eh? Very interesting. And I guess I've been quite lucky with the people I have worked with, and a lot of them are still pretty good mates. Like my group from Air New Zealand, for example.
Yeah.
The three of us worked at Air New Zealand for 10 plus years. We all started off in the same role and then kind of progressed up, and then eventually all ended up in the systems team together.
Oh, that's cool.
And then, yeah, we're still a tight little bunch today, which is pretty cool. Like, we haven't worked together for the last 3 years now, but we've got a little messenger group chat going on, and we talk daily, which is pretty cool. And we've also helped each other to get, new jobs and
working together for 10 years, like, that's a decent amount of time. You're gonna I find that I worked with someone for a year, and that's a good time to form some kind of relationship, let alone 10 years. You'd see each other grow and change and evolve over that time as well.
Yeah, you sure do, eh? It was pretty cool to see these two kind of evolve, and none of us work for Air New Zealand anymore. We've all gone and branched out and all doing very well, which is really cool to see.
In a way, that's probably almost better for your friendships as well, not having the professional, not both work or not all working in the same workplace anymore. That's probably better for your friendship, because it's not that it would be awkward, but sometimes working together creates a different dynamic in a friendship to when you're not working together.
Yeah, you're right on that. Although two of us actually work at the same workplace.
Oh, now you've gone to a new workplace together.
So I was very fortunate that that one of these people got me my current job.
Oh, well.
So it was kind of funny that we don't work in the same team, but we work for the same organisation and do cross paths at times.
So that's cool.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So backtracking a little bit, or looping back on it. So psychologists, their advice to you was to get new friends, basically, get away from the ones who are bringing the negative energy into your life. So having to do that sounded like it was a bit tricky. And what were some of the other things that they provided you? Did they provide any recommendations around, physical activity or fitness or getting outside or anything in that realm?
Yeah, probably one of the biggest things the psychologist kind of suggested was exercise. Yeah. Again, that's kind of a given now, I think.
Yeah.
But also trying to stay off devices.
Oh, yeah.
She did not like devices at all. It's just like, they can be helpful for work and things like that. But then when you start to create bad habits and go to bed with your phone, and so she kind of suggested removing phones from bedrooms. Psychiatrist advised to remove all devices from bedroom completely. So just tips like that. So I've done that, and now they've snuck their way back in.
But that's still not the end of the world. It sounds like you tried to do something that was, I think that's kind of unrealistic too. Having no devices in your room at all. But at least having tried it and then reintroduced it, I could imagine the habits would be slightly different there as well.
Yeah, they are now.
And I don't know if you follow Andrew Huberman on any platforms, but the research that he's coming out with in terms of the get sunlight early as possible in your day and reduce the amount of light in the evening, and then seeing the science about how that actually affects your mood, your mental health, but your sleeping patterns and everything. It's so interesting, man. Because prior to that, you would always hear people say, like, don't go on your phone at night, and try to get up and get outside in the morning, but that I never really understood or heard the science behind it. But to understand how it really positively benefits your mental health, but also sets you up for a good routine in the day, because as soon as you see that light, all of a sudden the clock in your mind is set for 16 hours from now, we're going to start getting tired. So you imagine if you're consistently waking up close to lunchtime, it's no wonder that your whole circadian rhythm is going to be thrown out, and then in time it's going to snowball into you not feeling so good. So it sounds like the advice that they were giving was a lot of just small habits that could positively benefit you over a long run.
Yeah, I think back then it was kind of the advice around small habits and stuff like that. But I do think, and especially in the last couple of years, the whole kind of, like routine, getting up early, kind of winding down before you go to bed, that's kind of become more prevalent. And, like the cold water stuff now. So that's something that I'm trying to implement. I was been swimming twice this week.
Yeah.
Out in the ocean
Nice.
after work.
Shit, that'd be cold.
Tuesday it was all right.
Yeah.
Thursday was significantly colder.
Yeah. I guess the water temps would be getting up a bit, eh?
Yeah, and then also like cold showers in the morning
Yeah.
after the gym.
Yeah.
Stuff like that, which I'm finding is pretty beneficial.
Yeah, I've been doing the same. I was doing cold showers, but now I'll fill the bath up the night before. So like 8 o'clock, 8:30 or whatever, fill the bath up, and then I'm only doing this 3 times a week too, because the not necessarily optimal, but what you should aim for is about 12 minutes in your week, as apparently a good time frame. So 3 mornings a week. That's what I've been doing. Fill it up the night before, and then the morning, go for a walk in the morning around like 5:45 or whatever. The only thing is that it's not super light at that time, but it's still kind of light. So go for a walk, only 10 or 15 minutes. Come home, have a warm shower, and then jump in the bath. Yeah,
Nice.
4 minutes. And I think because it's not an ice bath, it's difficult to get into like that. Like you're losing your breath and all that, but that's what you want. But once I'm in there, it's not that uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But I could stay in there for a long time. But at least the initial getting in there, like, man, it gets the adrenaline going. But that's what you want, because that's going to increase your dopamine levels over a long period of time. But I reckon the showers work just as well in terms of inducing that feeling. Whether or not it's scientifically it's as perfect because you're not fully submersed, it's still better than not having it, right? It's still going to induce that feeling of you losing your breath and like get the adrenaline going, and it can be way like easier in terms of the logistics of it, because you have your shower and then for the last 2 minutes or whatever, you're going to crank it on to cold, and then you're good to go.
Yeah. Showers, I've actually been like, I just jump in when it's cold.
Oh, so you don't have a warm one
No,
first?
I don't do it. It's
Yeah.
straight into the cold.
Yeah.
Which has been interesting.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah. And what's your strategy? Do you, like, say for me, when I'm getting into the bath, all I'm thinking is like, I know this is good for me. Like, I'm here for the challenge. I'm like, so I try and confront it head on. What's your strategy when you get into the cold water?
Yeah, I try and confront it head on as well. I think it's I do find it easier on the mornings I've been to the gym, because I'm always like hot and
your
sweaty.
body temp's up, eh?
Yeah. And that's easier to jump into a cold shower, but if you haven't gone to the gym in the morning and then you try and have a cold shower, it's hard.
Hard out, man, because I used to do them, because I used to get up and jump on the exercise bike, do like 30 or 40 minutes, and now that I'm not cutting, I'm not doing that so much. And I was the exact same. So easy to have a cold shower after you've been on the bike for 30 or 40 minutes. But then even now, the 10 or 15 minute walk gets me a bit more prepared, but I don't know if I could get up 5:30 a.m. and then jump straight into the cold bath.
Yeah,
it's probably, but the irony is that how difficult that would be is why it would be so good for you.
Yeah.
Even if you only did that once a week, the fact that it would suck so much is why it would be so good for you, because you're doing something so challenging. But
you'd feel awesome after.
Yeah. The theory of it's there, but I'm yet to do that in practice. I'll pass on that. Now, right at the beginning, you mentioned in terms of some of your upcoming goals was to get into police college. So I'd be keen to delve into that in terms of your goal of wanting to be in the police. What sort of spurred that idea or the aspiration?
That's an interesting question. For me, I guess, was never really interested in it. And then when I was working as corporate travel consultant for Air New Zealand, I managed all the travel for police. So I got to talk to them daily on the phone, talk to cops from different departments, organise all the travel for the dogs, used to deal with a dive squad, so they'd ring up, and because they're trying to get somewhere, you had to drop everything you're working on and just work on getting them somewhere.
So when they contact you, it needs to be done now.
Pretty much
most
now.
of the time.
We need to get somewhere now. So
oh, wow.
you just drop whatever you've got to go, and you just jump
all
on
in.
that. And I guess from that kind of like sparked the interest in it. And then like two of my really good mates now, one's a detective, one's training to be a detective. I actually met them through work, so I started organising their travel and all the travel for their witnesses for court cases and stuff.
Whoa.
And then one of them randomly rocks up to my house one day.
With a search warrant?
Nah, not with a search warrant, thankfully.
not this time.
And it turns out he was good friends with my flatmate's brother.
Oh, wow.
So we kind
Such a small world, man.
It was so funny. So I've been looking after him at work for ages, and then all of a sudden to work out and actually see him, like, you're this person.
Yeah.
That was pretty cool. And then I guess, those two mates have been like, we need you to join. Come on, do it. So this will be the third application when I get it in. The other two, first one got declined because that's when police had their policy on antidepressants.
Oh, true. Wow, that's interesting.
So they have kind of relaxed that, and it's now assessed on a case-by-case basis, which is good. That took a lot of fighting, and there was a few of us jumping up and down about it.
That doesn't seem very, for want of a better word, like woke, or sort of very, I don't know, inclusive. Like I'd be interested to know the reasoning. It's not like it would severely impair your ability to do your job.
Yeah, they never really had a good reason.
Just the way it is.
Yeah, that was just how they operated. And then it took actually a couple of detectives who were already in to share their mental health battles, and then we started to get some traction, and then they relaxed the rules and were like, we'll assess on a case-by-case basis. So I went through all of that, had to get signed off, couldn't have my psychologist sign me off. So I had to go to her colleague who was the police approved psychologist and pay, I think it was about $1,000.
Shit. Just to get a signature, basically.
To get this report. And then, second time around pretty much pulled out because of the cancer. So third time lucky.
Oh, wow. Oh, so that's been a few years that you've been wanting to do it then, if that was big. Yeah. Oh, wow. That's cool, man.
So I've just left it for the last, 3 or so years. I was like, and I've changed jobs a couple of times since as well. So I was like, there's too much going on.
In COVID times, I feel like it's still 2019, except it happens to be 2023. I trained a client at the gym. He was a young dude wanting to get into the police force as well. So I don't know heaps about the process, but I got a bit of an insight. And for him, bro, we need to move more in our podcast. All right, it was a nice intermission. The after hours lights, if you're listening, obviously you wouldn't have noticed, but the lights turned off, so had to go and turn them back on. Anyway, I think we were talking about how I had a client and young dude wanting to get into the police force, and he came to me wanting to improve his fitness and strength and stuff in order to be able to complete the physical component. Academically, he was fine, but physically, he needed to improve in order to pass it. So how do you feel in terms of the physical element or the physical criteria needed to get in?
Yeah, it's not too bad. Like, they have changed it from what it was. So it's probably a little bit easier now. But I've had massive issues with shin splints previously. So
is that from like when you're running?
That's from running. I absolutely hate running. So just kind of easing myself back into that at the moment, and there's definitely a lot I need to work on. The running's an interesting one, especially when you haven't done it in a long time, at least for me. So that lockdown we had in like August or something, I was like, I'm going to get back into running. Used to be pretty decent at running. Like, we're at school, would come second in the cross country, or like, had a reasonable fitness. When I did my PT certificate, I was like the best at running in there, and it just wrecked me, man. Like, I was so wrecked. I guess I didn't have like the best running shoes, so that might have been a component of it. But like muscular and joints and the cardiovascular component,
and I guess I was probably like 95 kgs, whereas I used to be like 80 kgs. It was so hard, man, and I'd never found running difficult. So what are you doing now in order to improve the running, or get more, I don't know if comfortable is the right word, but get more accustomed to it?
Oh, I'm just trying to go for small runs. Like last week was pretty much my first week back into it, and I really battled. So I've just started out on the treadmill, 100 meters on, 100 meters off. I did that twice last week, and I'll probably go and do that again shortly.
Yeah.
And we'll just build on that and eventually get outside of the gym, and
It's
because
exciting.
you don't want to be running on a treadmill all the time.
No, it's not ideal. I haven't voiced this anywhere yet because I don't want to be held accountable, but I've got this desire to want to do a marathon. And I was trying to figure out if it's feasible this year or not, but I've just got this desire to want to do it because will be such a physically difficult thing to do, and something that right now would be virtually impossible for me to do. I'm sure I could easily walk it, but to run it in a good time would be very difficult. So I've been thinking about running a lot lately too, and the strategy that you've implemented is exactly what I would do. I think when I tried to do it, I just tried to go too far, too fast, thought I was still super fit as I was 5 years ago when I was good at running. So if that's something I decide to do, my strategy would be the same. Run 1K or run 500 meters. Cool, that's good. Not injured, not sore. All right, let's do more the next day, or let's do more 3 days later, and slowly build upon it, instead of thinking, well, 10 years ago I could run 10Ks easy, like up and down hills, wouldn't even bat an eyelid at it. Yep, okay, well, I've been having a heavy emphasis on weight training for the past 5 years and not running. So it's sort of understanding where you're at, although your previous self or maybe someone else can do this thing really easily. You got to be self-aware, test the waters, see how far you can run. Okay, that completely destroyed me, and you did 800 meters. Scale it back and then implement a plan from there. So it sounds like you've implemented, or are going to implement, a pretty achievable plan.
Yeah, I've learned in the past, so
Yeah.
I don't want to go down that track again.
Yeah. And when you do get into the police force, where do you want to be heading? Obviously, there's so many different avenues once you do get in there. So what kind of route is it that you're wanting to follow?
Another good question.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm not really 100% sure yet. I think it would be quite interesting getting into like the whole kind of cybercrime and like money laundering stuff. That would be fairly interesting, and or even working with like IT, computers and stuff, and yeah, that would be quite cool.
What's your perspective on the frontline stuff? Because I guess you'd have to do the frontline stuff when you first start out, right?
Yeah, so you've got to do 2 years frontline.
Oh yeah.
It is what it is. I guess you don't have to enjoy it, but it's only 2 years. And then you can kind of branch out and do what you want to do. So 2 years isn't, it's not long really.
Nah. And I'm obviously no police officer, so I'm not educated on the topic, but my feelings of it is that there would be a component of it that would be, you get a lot of satisfaction from it, but then there could be a component of it that's you're obviously not liked by everyone, so it could be difficult to deal with a lot of the confrontation and the violence that might come at you. How do you feel about having to approach negative situations like that? You might want to come a little bit close to your mic too.
Yeah. That doesn't really bother me too much. I guess it's because I've been through my own challenges and have pretty much managed to tackle them head on. I guess the first couple of times dealing with people like that would be interesting. But I'm sure you get used to it.
Yeah, 100%. And I think a good thing is that you're coming at it with a lot of life experience. You're not 18 or 19 straight out of school, got this idea of wanting to be a cop, and then you're confronted with the reality of some situations that you wouldn't have ever known existed, which would be a huge deterrent, whereas I feel coming at it with a bit of life experience would work really well in your favour.
Yeah, I think so too. I've kind of, made up my mind now that I probably wasn't ready when I've applied before. And I've been through all this stuff since, and, I do have that life experience. It's interesting, these real young ones that get in straight out of school. Um, yeah, I'd say some of them probably struggle because they've got no life experience behind them. And it's interesting just talking to a couple of people I know who have been through police college and have either graduated in the last month or so or are about to in the next few weeks. And it's interesting what they've got to say about some of the people that are, on these wings at college, just totally not ready and have got no idea.
Yeah, that would be pretty rough. And that's kind of a perspective, almost retrospective view I have, I guess, since like doing my uni degree and stuff. It was kind of just a given for me that once I finished school, I grew up in Whakatane. Once I finished school, you move to one of the cities, Auckland, Wellington or Dunedin, and you go to university, and that's what you do. But then now looking back, it seems kind of crazy to me that you commit to doing this degree. Sometimes you don't even know if you want a job in the field or not, but you commit to doing this degree that is upwards of $40,000 or $50,000 in student loan, and you just genuinely have no idea what you're going to do with your life. But obviously you need to choose something, but still committing to something like that with virtually no idea of what you're actually going to do afterwards and no real life experience, it just seems kind of crazy to me now. Whereas imagine if when you were 25 that became the time that you would do some upskilling or some training logistically and feasibly. That's not the can't be done for everyone. But it seems like it makes way more sense to me to like either travel, get a job, do something else, and then commit to doing some kind of training, especially when there's that massive student loan that you could rack up and you don't even use your degree.
Yeah, that's another interesting topic, hey? I've got a few mates that have gone off and, done degrees, and they've been fortunate enough to get jobs in that field. But then I also know a lot of people who haven't gone down that track, and I'm one of those people. I haven't been haven't been to uni or anything, never had any interest in going. But I've kind of, carved my own way. I was only ever going to work for Air New Zealand for a year when I started in 2012, and that turned into nearly 10 years. Was only going to live in Wellington for a year.
Yeah.
Still here. So it's interesting what you can do with your life, even if you don't go to uni, and you can save a hell of a lot of money too.
Oh, absolutely, man. I see some of my mates who didn't go to uni and they've got houses and boats and like all this stuff now because they were a tradie or something straight out of uni, and then all of a sudden they're earning big bucks now and without the student loan as well. But the other thing with uni that's a positive thing, even if you don't use the degree, at least what I found, is that there's a massive networking component, and also leaving a small town, going to a bigger city is a big life experience too. But when you're going to uni, you make a lot of different connections with people too. So even if you don't use your degree, there's still this big networking component, and that's a big, life lesson too, how to network and meet new people and stuff. So it's not all bad, but yeah, I don't know. It just still seems crazy to me now that at 18 you make this decision to commit to this massive, massive thing. I kind of feel like that was the main things I wanted to talk to you about today. I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to bring up in particular.
No, I think we've covered everything.
I really appreciate how open you are about your journey and how willing you are to talk about it, because I know that it's probably not the easiest thing, obviously, to talk about, but I genuinely feel like that could help a lot of people. Honestly, if one person listens to this and that, gives them the incentive to check, go see a doctor, and then it prevents it from getting worse, that's a huge impact. So you never know the amount of impact that you can have by being open about what you've been through.
Yeah, no, exactly. And thanks for having me on. I guess that's my aim, is just to try and share what I've been through, and the hope that it helps someone, and that they don't have to struggle like I did.
And I know you put quite a few posts up on Instagram and stuff. So what was your Instagram handle? Was it Scott Martin or Scotty Martin?
Scotty_Martin.
Yeah, cool. Just if people wanted to...
Yeah, feel free to message me or add me.
Check you out. Yeah, that's a good point, actually. If you're listening or watching and you have some questions, I'd highly recommend messaging Scott, because I can understand that it would be a super daunting thing that you're confronted with. So talking to someone about, that's why today I wanted to delve into the specifics of what it actually looks like, because it's a big unknown thing. I'd definitely recommend people to message you, because you can give them that kind of advice.
Yeah, by all means, message me, add me. I'll be happy to chat. It's quite interesting the people we get talking to after podcasts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I quite enjoy that.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks heaps, bro. That's
Awesome,
us.
thank you.